Tonight, he said, wait, Torah is so special. Wait, stuck is so special. What do we do first? How do we prioritize? How do we reconcile? Find out. And we said, beyond how much we are quickly giving to God, the efficiency of giving to God through charity, there's something that does it in a deeper way, and that's Torah study. And we discussed how Torah study can give to God aspects of your animal soul that nothing else can give to God. We discussed how the thought and speech, the inner dimensions, are being given. We said the animal soul herself, until now we only were discussing the expressions of the animal. The animal soul herself, the intellect of the animal, literally becomes transformed and given to God during the time you're studying Torah. And we said that God is more in Torah than anything else. The rest of the commandments are his limbs. Torah is like his mind, his brain, his intellect, his will, such a greater investment of self. So it's such a greater power. We are saying how enormously powerful charity is. And now we're saying, but Torah study can do something nothing else can do, including, of course, charity. So how do I put these pieces together? As the Rebbe says, we are on page Mem Tes. We are 6 lines from the bottom of the page. And nevertheless, our sages said, notwithstanding how spectacular Torah is, notwithstanding what all the women said, that Dottie, and hopefully more of us remember this past Shabbos, our sages said, study is not the main thing. The main thing is action. The main thing is doing the commandments. So the main thing is doing the commandments, but Torah study, the only really strong way I give God my thought and speech, only with Torah study is the essence, energy of my animal changed. Everything else only changes the expressions of my animal. Torah changes my animal. In Torah, there's more God than in anything else. But our sages said, the main thing's not Torah study. The main thing's action. The main thing's go out and give more charity. Go out and eat more kosher. Go out and dress more modest. Go out and do those commandments, notwithstanding all of these advantages. And also, there's a verse that says today to do them, to do the commandments. Meaning, after a person passes away, the souls in the afterlife, they still study Torah. The souls above study Torah, but they can't do any commandments. For commandments, you need a physical body and be in a physical world. So today, the verse says, is to do them. Today, our injunction is go out and conquer the world. Do God's will. Do the commandments. Torah study? Yeah, it's nice. And you will continue to study Torah afterwards, in the afterlife. But the commandments, you can't do that. Yet we're saying it's so spectacular to study Torah in a way like nothing else. A halacha, a law. Umivatlin Talmud Torah Lakia mitzvah maisis. We stop studying Torah to fulfill an action commandment. That's not possible to be done by someone else. Because this is the purpose of man. This is the purpose of his creation. What are we in this world for? To do, to change, to conquer, to give to God by the commandments. Why did our soul come down into this world? Specifically in this lower realm to make it God's home through the commandments. To transform all that darkness, the evils, the energies of this world to light, to God energy, to reveal God energy through the commandment. And specifically, now we're going into verses discussing the redemption, because all of this is creating redemption. Specifically, in this world, in this physical world, through the physical actions of our commandments, the glory of God will fill this world. V'ra'u kol basar yachdav kanal. And as we said above, all flesh together, all flesh, including the 8 billion mankind, all flesh will see God. God will be so visible. And what's creating all that? Our commandments. What is going on? So here we're saying, first we said, we want redemption. We all do. I don't think we have to convince ourselves. We all want redemption. The whole world wants redemption if they only know about it. And we said, how do we get redemption? Commandment by commandment. Serving God. Give him your thought, give him your speech, give him your action, give him your service, give him a beautiful service. You're changing yourself, animal, soul, body, and the world that has to do with that commandment, and you're shifting it to the side of godly. You're shifting more to the side of godly. If you remember, there's all those real estate you own that's somewhere in the world that you're shifting to the side of godly. You are bringing redemption, action by action by action. And then we said, hey, go for charity. And then you bring a lot of the world to God. You give him the totality of your animal soul. Your whole body was invested in that work. You give him a lot of time and money, I love this world, and everything that had to do with the work. Whoa, huge amounts are now being given to God, creating redemption. And then we said, by the way, Torah study does something beyond any of this. Give God your animal soul's thoughts and speech. Gives God the core animal soul intellect. God is more invested in it, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to give God this world. We're here to bring redemption. We do that by action. Torah study is so special. But action is how we're bringing redemption. Action is how we're changing the world. And Torah study is so special. So we're almost in like a dilemma, a quandary. How do we reconcile this? To prove how special action is over Torah study, the rabbi brought a law. If you're studying Torah and there's a commandment that needs to be done then, no one else is around to do it, close your book, go do the commandment. That's why you're in this world, which seemingly implies like, all right, yeah, Torah study is wonderful, but no, put action first. That's why you're in this world. Focused here in this chapter, I'm bringing redemption. The road to redemption. And looking at the road to redemption, we really understand how special charity is. And as I said when I taught it, if I was just talking about charity, not within the context of this chapter, I could go on and on and on and on telling you how special charity is. And I hope at some point I do, because it's worth hearing. It's worth re-inspiring ourselves. But in the context of redemption, this chapter, charity quantitatively, efficiently, moves so much so fast to God and thus brings redemption. How within that perspective, where within there is Torah study? Masha Ainkain, which is not so. I'm actually looking back at that law I told you a few seconds ago, a few seconds in Tanya, not in our conversation. What if someone else could do that commandment that you stopped learning to do because no one else was around? What if someone else was around? Well, in that situation, you're not supposed to stop learning. Even though you could say, oh, Torah is only commentary clarifying how we're supposed to do these laws. So there says, wait a minute. What we could use to prove how great action is over Torah, if you really look at it closely, that's not exactly what it's saying. The law that the Alter Rebbe quoted was, you're studying Torah. A commandment comes up, urgent, must be done now. You're studying Torah and someone's car is stuck in the mud and they need you to extricate it because there's no one else around. Stop, go help the person. That's the law, which implies pretty clearly that the commandment is more significant, because when there's this head-on collision between the two, Torah steps to the side and you do the commandment. But there says, but wait a minute. The law is not, if you're studying because you got nothing better to do with your life, and then a commandment comes up, oh, close those books and go do the commandment, because there's nothing more important than a commandment. That's not the law. The law is if you're studying and there's a commandment that must be done and there's no one else around to do it. So the Rebbe says, let's be hypothetical. And anyway, this is all hypothetical. What if there was someone else around to do it? Oh, so keep studying. If a commandment is the most important thing, the commandment is why I'm in this world. This commandment is what's bringing redemption. Why am I keeping my book open and giving someone else the opportunity to do what I should be racing to do? I should be racing to do that commandment. I should be racing to bring redemption. Why am I still studying? Because studying is really special for your soul. There's nothing that feeds your soul like studying Torah. As we said, we already learned this in chapter 5. The only food for our soul is Torah study. Commandments don't feed our soul. God is most within Torah. As we said, we learned in chapter 23, the intimacy of the fusion of me and God is only in Torah. As the Rebbe just told us a few lines before, God is found in Torah. In a way, he's not found in any of the commandments. So is there anything that spiritually nourishes, heals, feeds, and sustains you like Torah? Nothing. No commandment. So why am I closing my book to go do that commandment? Because I'm here for a mission. I'm here to bring redemption. I'm here to serve God. I'm here to take God's will and actualize it and give it flesh. So if a commandment needs to be done and there's no one else here to do it, I am stopping this spiritual mikvah, this immersion in spirituality. I'm closing the book and doing what I'm in this world. But if there's someone else that can go and take care of that need, keep studying. Nothing is going to feed you like study. So going back to what Goldie was saying about which comes first, what the Rebbe is saying here is to spiritually feed and charge and inspire yourself, study and study and study and study. And nothing can give you what Torah gives you. And a person could say, I'm not intellectual, I'm academic, I just people like to learn. The Rebbe is saying it's sort of got nothing to do with that. If you like to learn, of course, it's easier. And hopefully everyone finds that part of Torah that resonates with their soul and mind. But the point is, it's a God thing. God is in Torah like in nothing else. You fuse with God through Torah like through nothing else. You feed your soul only through Torah. So your animal soul personality, intellect, is or isn't naturally in tune with it, it's still happening. As long as you're learning and completely understand what you're learning. You're digesting the thoughts, you're digesting the God in them. But commandments have to be done. And that's why we're in this world. And Torah has to be studied, because the more you study Torah, the more your soul is charged, inspired, racing to go serve God and do all those commandments. So it really is a dance between the two. It's almost as if we could say, there's nothing better for you than Torah, and there's nothing better for the world than the commandments. And as you study the Torah, you will then go and transform that world through a lot of commandments. Sort of like, it's not the same thing at all, but popping in my head here is the idea of Alter Rebbe, that the Rebbe quotes many times, that if you're so busy giving to others that you have no time to work on yourself, you should know that if you're so busy giving to others, the time you work on yourself will be 1,000 times as powerful. And the Rebbe says, and 1,000 times 0 is still 0. But if you are working on yourself, which in this context would mean you are studying yourself, even though you're busy the whole day studying and giving to others and helping others physically and spiritually. But those moments you carve out for yourself, which for most of us, spiritually carving out for ourselves means studying. For those moments that you are studying, because you're so busy giving to others, it will be 1,000 times as powerful. So there's a tremendous spiritual advantage that we only get feeding ourselves by Torah study. And there's a tremendous mandate to help the world. And the more we study Torah, we should have the energy to help the world. And if we don't have that much time to study Torah because we're busy all day giving to others, like our children are also others, then again, that time we're spending studying is 1,000 times more powerful. Literally, as the Rebbe says. It's not an exaggeration. It doesn't mean a lot. It means literally 1,000. And that's what the Rebbe says. And since it's a literal number, 1,000 times 0 is still 0. But if you are doing something, it's 1,000 times powerful. Any thoughts on this idea of how we really have? So Rachel said originally, when I raised the question, she said, we'll do it all. And in a sense, of course, we're coming back to that. But we're understanding that as we're doing it all, understand that the time you spend Torah, that time you spend in Torah is feeding you, is energizing you, is giving you the ability to do it all and serve God with all the commandments. So do people feel this as they study? Do they see how they do get spiritually energized, and that this does help them then go and do a lot of good things in the world?
So I, during the week, I do it kind of like faster than, I don't do it as deep as I should maybe, because there is always, time. But when I get to Friday night, after the Kiddush, after we eat, I sit in my corner, and it really is amazing how deeper I understand, because I go over the whole parasha again, or sometime I'll go to the Sikha. By the way, when you say Torah, you mean also the Sichot of the Rebbe, right?
Of course.
Yeah, everything that has to do
Every
with
aspect of Torah.
So it's really, really amazing how it's just like you feel what you learn, you know what I mean? It's a completely different from when I learn it, during the week. I
I'm
just
sure you're not
understand
the
it
only one
better.
that feels that. I'm sure other people can give their thumbs up and saying, we're exactly with you. Yes. Uh-huh. Okay, so Nechama, you're saying, I think what you're saying, you're not saying the Shabbos experience, you're saying the learning experience. That's what I understood Nechama's comment. If it meant for Shabbos, you could definitely clarify, but
Yes, just the learning experience in general.
Just learning in general. And like sometimes, and as she said, you don't realize, like if you're not learning, it's not like if you don't eat after a while, you might feel hungry, but the truth is maybe that's a good analogy. Because like if in the morning you didn't eat, maybe you're a little hungry, then it wore off. I think for most of us, I mean, thank God, we do our version of not eating isn't like God forbid people that really don't have food. And if you want a few more, you're functioning and you don't have to eat. But you're obviously functioning on a much weaker level because you don't have any energy in your system. But like you're distracted, you're not thinking about it, or you're not near food or whatever, nothing's appealing to you at the moment. But then when you eat, you like remember, oh my gosh, yeah, I was really hungry. I really need this energy. So sometimes, which I think is what Nechama is saying, when you don't study, it's not like you walk around saying, oh, I'm hungry, I need to study Torah. Oh, I feel less in my service of God. Give me some Torah. Where's a Torah energy bar? You're not necessarily processing it that way. But then sometimes when you do study, you're like, oh, this is what I was missing. Oh, now I'm awake. Now I'm alive. Now I'm good. And I agree with Rachel, and I'm sure many of us, I won't say all, but I would think all have that experience, that during the week, there's a lot of these things called distractions. And, there's wonderful inventions in our world, like phone and social media, and they're wonderful, wonderful things, but they just make the world even more a distracting environment. And I highly recommend turning off your phone when you are studying. So at least during those minutes you're carving out, they're actually real minutes and not interrupted by beeps that you're not going to, but you sort of are in the back of your brain, like wondering what you're missing. And yeah, the world is a distracting place. And that's the beauty of Shabbos. God said, I'm resting. We're going to a deeper dimension. God is no longer creating through speech for the duration of Shabbos. It's God's thoughts. It's a more inner space. We want to call it a slower space, a more intimate space, and our minds are clearer and we can learn and really feel it.
I also want to add that, I'm sorry, when I learn on my own, so I understand it on a different, on one level, but then when I learn it with another person or like with my husband, who's, then it becomes even, I get his perspective and my perspective, and then it comes together. And that's when, so that's, I think it's the time that I can most connect to him is through the learning of the Torah. And then we find it, and then we both understand it on a different level. He knows that he couldn't get what he did without giving it to me, and then I wouldn't get it on the level that he gave it to me. You understand?
I totally understand. And I think it's a beautiful Shalom Bayis tool for people that are looking and to connect to your husband through learning. That sounds awesome. And I think every one of us probably are like, wow, we want to do that too. We want to try to get that time and that study, because you're right. It's very intimate. It's very beautiful. It's very bonding, and each one really respects the other and really is gaining from the other's perspective and insight. And in general, putting on the side the amazing Shalom Bayis aspect, the harmony in the home aspect, it's always better to learn with someone else, we're told. Of course, some people will tell me no, they much prefer learning themselves. And I'm sure there are people like that. But in the general rule, the process, exactly what Rachel's saying, of having to articulate your thoughts and understand someone else's, and then in the back and forth, I mean, listen, we're the originators of the system of Chavrusa, those two minds sharpening each other through study. And I could definitely say, I'm sure all of us gain much more when we share with someone else. And I can definitely say, as a teacher, you understand it much more when you teach it than when you were preparing it. The process of giving it over just pulls at a deeper, not only because they ask you questions, you have to actually think it, even just the process of giving it over, you have to pull out from yourself. And so many times I could prepare something, and I think it's nice, and then I give it over, and I'm like, this is amazing, this is fascinating, this is unbelievable. And I'm like, what happened? I'm the same person, and I was the one that studied it originally. There's some very tremendous gift. I know Sarah said she now started teaching through the CMC, and anyone that has that opportunity, and a person should never feel, well, I don't know enough to teach. And the Rebbe, you just have to find some willing person that wants to learn. But the Rebbe very often would say or write to people that if you even know the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, share that with someone. And if you know the first two letters, wow, you've got double information to share. Goldie?
Isn't that the way they teach doctors even? They say, right, you see one, you do one, and then you teach one.
Because that's when you really get it. That's when you really get it. And it's true for all of us in anything we're teaching. Absolutely. And sometimes you're teaching something very basic, like, I don't know, you drive a stick shift car, and someone says to you, how do you do that? And you're like, how do I do it? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just doing it. Oh, wait, let me stop. Let me think. Let me understand what I'm doing. Let me give it over. It's a totally different world. So yes, tremendous plug for people to study. For people to study with their husbands. For people to add and study on the Sabbath, on the Shabbos, if you haven't tried it. It might be a very different experience than during the week. And for people to study with someone else or teach. Study with someone else and teaching really is such a gift for you to integrate and internalize on a much deeper level. So anyone else can share their experiences along these lines? Can you understand, and have you experientially relating to what the Rebbe is saying, how the best thing to feed yourself is Torah, and God needs you to do a lot of commandments to turn over that world. So study that Torah so you have the energy, the spiritual energy, the spiritual drive to turn over the world. Anyone else have seen this in themselves? So Nechama shared, and Goldie, and Rachel. Anyone else?
I think that learning itself is a motivator. That's the learning motivates you to do. That's when you learn, it brings out that motivation. Like it's intrinsically in there.
Intrinsically in there. In other words, in general, like the more I study, the more I want to give God the world and bring redemption. So therefore, I'm more motivated to do it.
Right.
Sure, it is. And the more you learned in this chapter about charity, I hope every one of us was more motivated to give charity, because we were talking about how important it is. And then, of course, there's us from us saying the overarching themes of Torah study, which are God is real. The world is not so real. God is very real. And the more we study and feel God's reality in the world a little bit less, the more, like Prima was saying, we have motivation to turn over the world, to bring redemption, to do a lot of commandments. So that's very true. So I was saying on the level of it's spiritually feeding you so you have the energy to do it. And Prima was saying on the, we'll call it intellectual plane, it's going to drive you to do it. Watch yourself, because this really happened. It really, really is true. And Torah really, really feeds us. Even if we're pushing ourselves to learn, we're forcing ourselves to learn. But it's like a lot of good things you force yourself to do. Like you could compare exercise the same way. A lot of people force themselves to exercise and feel so much better afterwards. A lot of people force themselves to go on Mitzrayim and feel so much better after. Force yourself to make that phone call and feel so much better after. So watch yourself, because this really works. This really happens. And it doesn't just happen for people that like to learn. It doesn't just happen for people who have a better background. It doesn't just happen for people. It happens for every single one of us. So watch yourself and see it happen. And that's a great motivation to keep doing it. All right. So continuing. V'hainu. So why is this that actually to feed myself, prioritize Torah study? But if something needs to be done, close your book and go out, because you're here to give God his world. Why is it that otherwise, if someone else is doing that commandment, I'm supposed to be learning, or I would want to be learning? If I'm in the middle of learning, don't stop. Because Torah uniquely holds God like nothing else. Torah is God's intellect. When you study Torah, the only qualification is You have to understand it. Rachel said before, does this also count to talk of the Rebbe? Any part of Torah this is true for. It's true if you're learning law, if you're learning Rambam, Maimonides, if you're learning Talmud, if you're learning the scriptures, the Chumash, the Rashi, any part of Torah, that is God's will and wisdom. It's his thoughts. It's him. There's nothing more you than your thoughts, because there's nothing more God than his thoughts. And that's what we get when we study Torah. So when a person is invested in Torah, again, this doesn't mean like you're 3/4 asleep and turning pages. I have had many of those experiences in my life. I'm very familiar with them. It means when actually your brain is computing. Now, if like me, you sometimes have those experiences, you know what? Keep doing it. Why? Because it's like every other thing. If we do it imperfectly and we keep doing it, we have a chance someday we're going to do it for real. I don't understand what I'm saying. I'm falling asleep over it. I'm not really enjoying it. I'm not really gaining anything. Then we never have an opportunity to actually do it for real. So therefore, even if you're saying my Torah study is not what you're talking about, keep doing it, because there will come the point of time when you won't be as exhausted, when it will click in your brain, and when all of this will happen. When you're studying Torah, you get God's being. You get him. Now it's all him, of course. But when we say you get him, we mean that inner core, just so we can understand with ourselves. We are made in God's image. There's a verse that says, from my flesh I will see, I will perceive God. So if we look at ourselves and understand in ourselves that difference between investing your fingers in something, investing your mind in something, and then understand what the Rebbe is saying, that in Torah, that's when God's giving you his mind. That's when God's giving you himself. So when a person is invested, studying, that's why I said about that sleeping situation, he draws down on himself. Or in Sof Baruch Hu b'Yasser Seis v'Ar Gadol in case v'Arav Shachs like Pekudim Shein Avram Demalka. So when the person is invested in studying, which invested means, again, like Goldie said, let's lower the bar, not raise it. It means you're understanding it. Ideally, it means you're understanding it and your mind is full of it, and you're not also computing your laundry or Passover shopping list. Ideally, you could even have this level of intention, like, God, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this to connect to you. I'm doing this to fuse with you. I'm doing this because you want me to do this. I'm doing this to bring her down. Minimally understand it. Even better, your mind is full of it without the distractions of life. And even better, you actually have intention. There's a spiritual overlay of why you're doing it, of what you're feeling as you're doing it. But at least just do it and understand it. At that point, you draw God down to you. Well, every time you serve God, you draw him down to you. True, the Rebbe says, but there's a critical difference. Every time you serve God, every time you do a commandment, the part of God invested in the commandment is what's coming down. And generally, the commandments are called the limbs of God. So it's akin to God's investment in his body. And when you study Torah, that part of God in Torah is coming down. And that's his mind. That's his being. That's his will and wisdom. That's his self. And that's what's coming to you. And that's why the Rebbe says nothing is going to affect you spiritually as much as opening up that book, going online and listening, watching. We have so many opportunities today, so many different ways to do it in so many different languages. It has become so user-friendly, accessible, whatever term you want to give. I sometimes look at my house and I believe and I know and I have no question that I personally in my home, or I should say my husband, owns more books of Jewish law and thought and Torah, will and wisdom than whole towns owned a few hundred years ago. And I don't think it's only true for my house. I just happen to be looking at my walls. This is a wealth. This is unbelievable. And in every way you could think of, God has made himself so accessible. Torah, as a student once said to me many years ago, and that's always stayed with me, is like God's diary. He's writing himself into the Torah, and he's willing to share it with us. We just have to open it up and study. And then we're privy to reading God, God's self, God's diary. And therefore, we have an interesting statement in the Talmud. So based on all this, we understand what it says in the Talmud. Rav Sheshes, a great scholar, said, Rejoice, my soul. This word might sound a little different because it's Aramaic. L'cha karei, l'cha tanei. For you, I learned the verses. I learned the scriptures. For you, I learned the Mishnah. My soul, you're so lucky. You have such a great life because every time when I'm studying, it's for you. You, my soul, are the beneficiary of all this God. Moshe Kastud, the Makam Acher, Ba'arichas, I explained other ways at length. And Goldie wrote, in case no one read it, because I thought that was fascinating, that it used to be, if you had 200 books, that was a big library. Count how many you have in your house. Count. Or if you can't count, just count how many are on one shelf and then multiply by all the shelves and all the bookshelves. And understand how many we have. That wealth, God is saying, hey, redemption is coming. I'm making myself so accessible. All you need to do is want, and it's at your fingertips. Sarah.
I had a really hard time getting on tonight, but Baruch Hashem, I finally did. I went on the phone and stuff. But we'll always need books, no matter how electronic the whole world is. We have Shabbos and Yontif, and there's something about whether you're holding a pamphlet or a book, putting it on a table, a lap. It's so different. I know a lot of people like to read and, do different things, and they could do their chitas and everything on their phone when it's permissible. But there's still something very precious about learning from Sfarim.
I agree with you 100%. I cannot learn from a computer. I agree with you 100%. Thank you for you might be right, but I agree with you, Sarah, 100%. I don't, if I'm using my phone, it's just because I'm somewhere where I don't have access to the actual physical book. I far prefer it. I don't know why. I agree with you. I think we have a relationship with books that is not the same as something electronic and digital. But maybe if I was younger, I would think differently. So,
yeah, me too.
This is how I think now.
So imagine me. If you're saying that, imagine me. But let's not get into an argument.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts on this? Any other practical application? How you can apply this in your own life? A way you could think of how you can upgrade, maybe take Rachel's concept, try to dedicate some time on Shabbos. She's so right. Minds are on a higher level. We're on a totally higher level on Shabbos and everything. Find a partner. Get your husband to be your partner. Find a student. Carve out time in your day before the kids wake up, after they're sleeping. It's a gift, and it's a gift that's incredible that we have the gift, and then we have to really, 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 I definitely talking to myself, force ourselves to take advantage of this incredible gift.